Next up is a session which focuses on Hinduism. In many ways, I certainly am an extremely proud Hindu because of the completely Catholic, plural, undefinable nature of Hinduism. It's the cosmos itself. But over the last, 50, 60, 100 years, since the Bengal Renaissance, since modernity, Hinduism has begun to mutate itself and become in many ways a codified and a deeply oppressive structure as well. To discuss that mutation, to discuss what is this way of life that we take such pride in and how it is being mutilated, we have an excellent speaker, Jyotirmaya Sharma, who's written many books, one very recently on Vivekananda, which completely redefines the way one reads Vivekananda. And in conversation with him is Tarun Tejpal. Please welcome them on stage.
There is no question more important to us on the subcontinent in India than the one I'm going to be posing to Jyotir today and to his exegesis of what it means. Jyotir, tell us, there are two connected questions that actually face us and have been facing us now for several decades, and probably you'd say 200 years. Who is a Hindu, and what is Hinduism?
Well, I think that's the question we should stop asking. It's a question which this fantastic period called the 19th century forced us to ask. One is, to put it simplistically, an empirical question. The other is a normative question. Now, if we get out of this business of asking the question...
You can't hear him? Will you just... Is that better? No, just leave it. Yeah. See?
Can you hear me now? This question that the 19th century patented, who is a Hindu, what is Hinduism, and thought that the answer to one would automatically answer the other. If we get rid of this and ask the question, what do Hindus do? Then we get into specifics. We get into history. We get into nuance. And it also makes us escape the greatest banality that has come to us in the last 150 years, which is the moment you want a defense of Hinduism, not that it needs defending, people say, but it's a way of life. I think it misses the politics inherent in that statement that it's a way of life. Whose way of life? Togadia's way of life? Modi's way of life? Advani's way of life? Whose way of life? It's a political question. So let's stop asking that question, who's a Hindu and what is Hinduism?
So how do we try and describe, if we were not to ask that question, if we were to ask, as you said, what does a Hindu do? What do you think a Hindu does?
They do many things. They do many things, good, bad, indifferent, ugly, sublime. And the answer is they do many things. Depends on the question, depends on the problem. I think part of the problem with religion becoming so important in the nationalist discourse and almost getting subsumed within what the Indian nation is the problem. We tend to think that the Indian nation, as we perceive it now, is divided into men of light and men of darkness. We tend to magnify the good guys and damn the bad guys. I don't think there are good guys and bad guys. There are good ideas and bad ideas. And I think one needs to get self-critical and reflective about it.
So if I understand what you're saying, Jyotir, you're saying that the need to construct a Hindu identity is a recent project.
It's not only a recent project, it's also a modern project. It's a modern Western project. I mean, everybody in the 19th century asked this question. We are a slave nation, we need to be free, They read people like Mazzini
In Italy.
and in Italy, and said, Mazzini said, every nation must have a core, a center. And they asked themselves, what is the core or the center of this nation that we are envisioning? And since technologically the West was far advanced by then, in many respects we were lagging behind, they somehow came to the conclusion that religion was the core of the nation. And religion then got mixed with other categories, spirituality, so we are a spiritual people. I call these shared myths. I mean, if you see from the 19th century the shared myths that we have, Hindus are mild, Hindus are tolerant, Hindus are non-violent, Hindus are non-materialistic, Hindus have always given the world spirituality. I think if one starts to question and unscramble these assumptions, I think we'd be better off.
So who were the lightning rods who were, in a sense, articulating these assumptions? Ramakrishna, Vivekananda, Veer Savarkar? Who is it around whom these ideas are coalescing and then being put out into the public domain?
Ramakrishna was a jolly guy. He wasn't bothered about these questions. Ramakrishna was a mystic, he was a tantric, and he didn't create the joyless Hinduism that his disciple and many others created. Of course, there are also the assumptions that the Orientalists and the Indologists brought in as to what Hinduism was, what Islam was, and so on and so forth. So I don't think
That's the outsider's view that then becomes the insider's own view, self-view.
Partly does, but it's also partly, in a certain sense, a discomfort with what Ramakrishna to me represents, quintessentially, joy. Joy is subversive, happiness is subversive. Singing, dancing, celebrating, sexuality. I mean, all these are extremely subversive to any organized religion that wants to control, unify, and when it gets mixed with nationalism, then you have a problem. You have a witch's brew.
So what happens with Vivekananda?
A lot of things happen with Vivekananda. He repudiates Ramakrishna, doesn't think Ramakrishna has an idea in his head, to be truthful, is deeply enamored by the Western interpretations of Hinduism, especially by Schopenhauer and Schopenhauer's very important student, Paul Royston, and creates this entity which shrinks the space that Hinduisms have. I think it's a mistake to talk of Hinduism. I mean, that's the modern travesty. There are Hinduisms, and that space was shrunk by Vivekananda.
And he's doing it in pursuit of two goals. One being to give it a narrative of great antiquity, and second is to kind of posit it as a response to Western imperialism.
Partly that, but I don't think that there's too great a preoccupation with antiquity. The antiquity is picked up and constructed arbitrarily in terms of a patchwork quilt of ideas taken without fidelity to philosophical traditions and so on and so forth. I'll give you a small example. The idea of action. I mean, you usually associate Vivekananda by, haranguing people to act, to be active, to do more, and so on and so forth. And he picks that up from the Mimamsaka notion of action, and sort of interpolates it into his practical Vedanta. These are complex things that are happening. But I think the important thing is that, in a certain sense, it gets sucked into a narrative of nationalism, and everybody seems to be comfortable with it, because I think the problem is with how do you create self-images, and these self-images are potent. That's why the nationalist narrative is problematic. I'll give you a very odd example, almost a non sequitur. The Lieberman Commission report regarding the felling of the Babri Masjid came a few years ago, 8,000 pages. And of course, the press doesn't read it 1,000 pages. So there is a summary at the top, which basically says he's also indicted Vajpayee and he's indicted Kalyan Singh and Advani and the rest. But when you read that report, and it's a remarkable document in terms of how what's this form of Hinduism permeates all aspects of ideology. There is a paragraph in the report where Lieberman says, India is a democracy only because India is Hindu. I mean, how do you arrive at that situation? You arrive at that because the self-image from the 19th century is, we are a tolerant, nice, benign, sweet people.
Is this to some extent a googly spun by Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi?
Gandhi is complicated. I wish you hadn't asked me this question. Gandhi is complex. Gandhi partakes of all the self-images and assumptions of the 19th century to a great extent. I mean, Gandhians deny this, but it's not true. He is part of that continuum, part of that evolutionary schema of building the self-image. He also takes on every single caricature of other religions.
And if I may interrupt, and for him too, in a deep sense, it is also it's still a political project.
Yes, but I mean, where one needs to make a distinction that they shared ideas, but their politics was different. Savarkar's ideas and politics were a piece. Gandhi has this schizophrenia where the ideas spring from the same source, but the politics is slightly different. Not all that different, but slightly different.
No, when you say that, I'm just trying to clarify this for the audience. You're saying basically that Gandhi is also picking, in a sense, from the continuing 19th century narrative. He's just trying to create a self-image of the Hindu, but the way he wants to play it out is very different from the easy certitudes with which Veer wants to play it out.
Yes, yes, and also I think in his case, there is an essential modesty.
Of inquiry.
Essential modesty, yes, and also a wiliness as far as politics is concerned. I mean, there's so much of morality in Gandhi. There is so much of moral narrative in Gandhi. But his politics doesn't end up being morality play. He is a ruthless politician as well. And I think somewhere there is a misfit between Gandhi's ideas and his politics.
Look, to stick to Hinduism, I just want you to help us understand this first, the provenance of Hinduism, because the easy assumptions that you're talking about is something that almost all of us in this room live with. Those easy banalities, as you said, we are tolerant, we are non-violent, we are accommodating, we are plural, and we've always been so, and we've always been Hindu. Is it not true that Yuan Sang and later Al-Biruni, right up till 1,000 years ago, were traveling through India but not mentioning us as Hindus anyway, or not mentioning any organized Hindu religion? Even in Akbar's time, Abul Fazl and all writing were not writing of the organized Hindus in any sense. So at what point does this idea that we are Hindu, where does it begin to coalesce?
19th century. I think.
You're shocking a lot of people in this room.
Yeah.
You think Hinduism is 5,000 years old.
Let me tell you this. We have been told this. I mean, it was sects and philosophical schools, several sects, several philosophical schools in conflict with each other. But did it determine the lives and politics of people in that compelling a way that we are told these days? I don't think so. I mean, when you go to the Brihadishwara temple in Tanjore and look at that fantastic temple, is it a religious monument, or is it the monument to show the power and the glory of the king? It's a monument to the majesty of the man who built it. I think a lot of life went on without religion being so compelling a factor.
In fact, Richard Eaton yesterday made this point while discussing the demolitions of Hindu temples.
Richard Eaton is my guru.
So your guru said that the whole idea that there was an Islamic-Hindu conflict
Yeah.
is actually myth-making of the present, whereas it was always a political, always a political essaying that was going on. Even the demolition of a temple was a political act more than a religious act.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I think the problem why we are discussing this today, and probably why I'm here, is I think we made a mistake since probably, I mean, if one has to put a date there, 1992, the demolition of the mosque. We needed to find an answer to a question which was, in a certain sense, a disturbing question. In a certain sense, it was self-deception. How could the Hindus do it? And the answers that were given reduced Hindutva, or political Hinduism, to a perversion or an aberration or a departure from something pure called Hinduism. Whereas I think that's a mistake. One has to say Hindutva or political Hinduism is the dominant face of Hinduism today, not the only face, but the dominant face. I mean, it's as absurd as saying, I mean, if you today had, I'm sitting next to you, and I were to produce a picture of mine, a photograph of mine, which is 20 years old, when I was younger, thinner, probably better looking, and I said to you, Tarun, this is the real me. Talk to him.
Well said.
This is not the real me. The bloated, older, graying self is not the real self. The photograph, which is 20 years old, is the real me. I don't think that works. Hindutva is part of Hinduism. It is the dominant face of Hinduism today. The caveat there is, it's not the only face of Hinduism.
Is Hindutva religious, or is it actually purely a political phase?
It's a political, modern, West-inspired monstrosity.
Why, Jyotir, has it acquired such wide traction? This particular phase of the many Hinduisms that we have.
Because we haven't given enough emotive content to the democratic ideals which we give lip service to. If I say something about an Indian god, a Hindu god, there'll be the VHP and the Bajrang Dal baying for my blood and saying our sentiments have been hurt. But if I were to say, I cherish freedom or justice or equality as much as you cherish your gods, and I'm offended that my sense of justice or freedom has been offended, nobody is going to kill anyone. I think the democratic ideals haven't been given enough of an emotional content.
Jyotir, are you a Hindu?
I'm a Hyderabadi.
The Sharma suggests to me that not only are you a Hindu, but you're a Brahmin Hindu.
Well, I mean, I was born one.
So what is your self-description? Would you call yourself a Hindu? When you fill up the endless forms that the Indian government gives us, what do you write?
I say I'm a non-believer. Well, let me qualify that. I think I would like to believe in a non-transcendental idea of God, which Hinduism doesn't allow me to.
What about Hinduism looks good to you when you look at it?
Aesthetics.
Even now?
Yeah. So I can go to a temple and admire the architecture and the frescoes.
That's old stuff.
Without getting into the rituals or whatever else it is. Certainly.
But now I said, as Hinduism exists today, or Hinduisms of the Hinduisms that exist today.
Does it exist?
Because aesthetics today, I mean, we can't say too much about Hindu aesthetics today, but as it exists today, is there anything?
It needs to reflect. It needs to reflect and ask the question with which we began. What is it that Hindus do? Because when I see in Hyderabad people going to Tirupati in hordes, they carry very material aspiration to the gods. It's not about orthodox Hinduism of the kind that the RSS or the BJP or the VHP talk about. They are going to Tirupati asking for a promotion that they haven't got. They go to Tirupati to ask for passing an exam or mitigating an illness. I think there is something sublimely touching about that.
We have very little time left, but I really want you to just quickly sum up in the context of Hinduism, the RSS right-wing Hindu project. What is the kind of Hindu belief system that they're trying to work with and impose on everybody?
A monochromatic, shrunk, ideologically workable idea of what they think is faith.
What is the danger of that for us?
The danger for us is that you persuade people into believing things that are not true. Let me just finish with an example. You read any of the great ideologues of the RSS, Golwalkar or whoever, and there is one single quote from an Upanishad that is often quoted to prove what you were earlier talking about, these thousands of years old history of Hinduism. And that quote is, listen, O, this is the RSS version, listen, O world, we are immortality's children. Stunvantu vishve amritasya putraha. Now, in the Upanishad, the word vishve does not mean the world. In Vedic Sanskrit or Upanishadic Sanskrit, the word vishve doesn't mean the world. It means, O people, the people who are in front of me, who are listening to me. Now, that's been converted into saying we as Hindus had a cohesive, coherent identity, and we were telling the world, at the time this Upanishad was composed, one of the early Upanishads, that we are immortality's children. I think this whole business of constructing out of the partially quoted quote a Hindu identity, I think this will have to be interrogated severely.
Jyotirmaya, the last question. When people like you and I actually set ourselves up in an argument against the Hindu right, should we be speaking as Hindus?
I think we should be speaking as citizens and democrats, because that's something they don't understand.
So you said this yourself earlier, how do you have a conversation when the other party does not even recognize you as a dialogue partner?
Keep talking.
And you think that would work?
Democracy is about patience. I think the problem with Indian democracy today is impatience.
Do you have any sense of alarm about where we are today in this whole discussion?
No.
You think we will be okay?
Yeah, we keep talking.
That's a great note to end on. Thank you so much.